Immer noch Trommeln, ne? Wow.
suffered the atomic bombing in 1945. Each August, throughout Japan, people gather to float lanterns in honor of those victims and all who suffer in wars. Tonight, we reaffirm our commitment to ending nuclear proliferation and all warfare. My name is Beverly Bean, and I'm a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Monterey County branch. We are the group that developed this program, and this program is also sponsored by the Peace Coalition of Monterey County, the Monterey Peace and Justice Center, Monterey Peninsula Friends Meeting, the Quakers, and the Veterans for Peace, Monterey Chapter 46. If you'd like to make a contribution to this year's Peace Lantern ceremony, there are several donation jars on tables on the landing. I want to thank Shinso Mugen Daigo, the wonderful Taiko Drummers, for their exciting performance. The sound amplification is being provided by Stu Hayden. We wish to thank Stu for his help tonight and over the previous years. I want to thank Timothy Barrett, Michael Baer, and Justin Loza for providing the truck and doing the heavy work of transporting our chairs, tables, and other supplies. Many thanks to Catherine Crockett, president of the Monterey Peace and Justice Center, who organized the publicity and the transportation of materials. Okay, on with the show. We are happy to welcome Reverend Elaine Gurman, co-minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Monterey Peninsula, to open the ceremony with a blessing. Thank you.
Spirit of life, creative force of love in the universe, God of many names, we gather here this evening to remember together. We're here to remember the events of August 1945, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. We remember these events of 74 years ago and the many victims. We remember our fellow humans who suffered, the loved ones who were lost. We remember with sadness and compassion and love. In front of the Hiroshima Peace Memorial's eternal flame, the inscription reads, "Rest in peace. We will not make the same mistake again." We are here to remember, but not only to remember, but to resolve to continue the challenging struggle of nuclear disarmament and to work for global peace, to remember the victims and to pledge to work to prevent the making of the same mistake ever again. Let us each recommit ourselves this evening to the goal of world peace, remembering those who have suffered and the lessons we have learned, and resolving to work for more justice, more peace, and more love, beginning with ourselves. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Elaine. Next we have Chris West, a 9th grader at Monterey High School, who will read the story of the paper cranes.
There's a Japanese belief that a sick person who even on their deathbed can fold 1,000 paper cranes and will be out of danger. Sadako Sasaki was an infant when the bomb fell on Hiroshima. When she was 12 years old, she fell ill with leukemia as a result of being exposed to the radiation from the bomb. As Sadako's condition grew worse and worse, she set about the task of folding cranes. And as soon above her hospital bed there arose a web of strings, which the little cranes fluttered. But when the little girl had made her 600th little paper creation, her strength began to ebb away, and with number 644 she was forced to give up altogether. 10 years after the atom bomb had fallen, Sadako died, yet another of its victims. In her memory, her friends completed her 1,000 paper cranes, and all over Japan, children began to make paper cranes to raise money for a monument to the child victims of the atom bombs. It is said that 2/3 of people killed by the atom bomb were children, women, elderly, and almost were all civilians. Today, school children in Japan and across the world make paper cranes from Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. We have paper cranes decorating the railing up here if anyone wants to see what they look like. Mayors for Peace. Oh, thank you. Mayors for Peace is an international organization of cities dedicated to the promotion of peace. It was established in 1982 by Hiroshima Mayor Takashi Araki in response to the atomic bombing on August 6, 1945. Since then, mayors throughout the world have signed on. When mayors sign on, it means they support commencing negotiations toward the elimination of nuclear weapons by the year 2020. There are now 7,975 member cities around the world. In 1985, Carmel and Marina joined Mayors for Peace. And Pacific Grove, host of the Peace Lantern ceremony, joined in 2011. In 2018, Monterey joined. We are proud to have the mayor of Pacific Grove, Bill Peake, here tonight to address us. Please welcome him.
First, I'd like to thank all the folks who have helped organize this remembrance and the Peace Lantern ceremony, especially Beverly Bean. And thanks to all of you here tonight participating and all the organizations. It's such a beautiful summer evening at Lovers Point, the closing of a glorious day on the Monterey Peninsula. It could be easy to think there's not a care in the world. Unfortunately, we know that is not true. That's why we are gathered here tonight, in recognition of the devastating effects of nuclear weapons. I'm honored to be asked to help with this message of peace. Since Mayors of Peace was established in 1982, as you heard, nearly 8,000 cities worldwide have joined in the quest of peace through the abolition of nuclear weapons. And also, as you heard, I'm pleased to report membership includes the cities of Pacific Grove, Monterey, Carmel, and Marina. Threats to the development and use of nuclear weapons is seen in the news today all too often. But it doesn't have to be this way. Mayors for Peace is working towards peace and a world without nuclear weapons. It is raising a worldwide call for leadership to prevent nuclear war from ever happening again. This voice is growing, and with it, the strength of the message. We know what we're facing. War, by its very nature, brings death and suffering. But we also know how to be part of the solution, to join others in a chorus advocating for peace and the elimination of nuclear weapons. Let's call on all leaders to make a pledge towards this end. Let's ask leaders and candidates to make known their positions on preventing war, returning to diplomacy, and eventual elimination of nuclear weapons. These should be priority issues. We need leaders who embrace efforts for achieving worldwide peace. I believe everyone's voice can make a difference. Let's all send this message. Thank you for caring.
Thank you, Mayor. We are honored to have Chris Hasegawa with us tonight as our keynote speaker. Prior to retiring, Dr. Hasegawa was a founding science faculty member and dean at California State University, Monterey Bay. Dr. Hasegawa serves the community on the Board of Trustees for the Spreckles Union School District, the Board of Directors for ALBA, Agriculture and Land-Based Training Association, and on the Board of Directors of Monterey Peninsula Voices. Chris is married to Denise, a cardiac rehab nurse and one of our Taiko drummers. Thank you, Dr. Hasegawa, for being with us.
Thank you, Beverly. Where is my taiko drummer. She's over there someplace. Each year, we come together here to commemorate the anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Within the first months after the bombings, approximately 130,000 people were killed in Hiroshima. In Nagasaki, 70,000. In accounts by survivors, it is common to read of the inhuman scenes that resembled hell on earth, an inferno of intense heat radiating from the hypocenter that reached several thousand degrees Celsius. Human beings vaporized and horrifically burned. Fires that spread for miles around where the bombs were dropped, and black rain, sticky, dark, poisonous radioactive precipitation that fell from the sky and poisoned many thousands of people. In the decades since, radiation emitted by the bombs has continued to scar and claim the lives of people who were exposed to the bombings. The medical issues facing the hibakusha, the A-bomb survivors, have included cancer, birth defects, radiation diseases in children born to victims. This shouldn't be something that we do to people. This is horrifying. We come here to honor the memory of those that we lost in the hope that their loss will help us to prevent the use of such weapons ever again. We also come here to feel part of a larger community beyond those that we see locally that are engaged in the struggle for peace worldwide. But how do we fight for peace? I mean, fighting for peace almost seems like a contradictory phrase. But those of us that are dedicated to the cause of peace must battle fiercely. For peace is not easily won. What battles need to be fought to win peace for future generations? I've got a couple of suggestions, some things that I'm working on myself. One is, use your outrage. The things that I described to you are not things that we ought to talk about passively with a scholarly dispatch. These are horrifying events, and we ought to feel that and emote that and share that. Whatever sparks our passion needs to be communicated to keep that story alive, and keeping that story alive is critical so that we don't do it again. I was raised a Presbyterian, and recently my pastor reminded me that prayer is a way to build a communication to God and is intended to change us, not God. No matter what higher power you look to, outrage can be a powerful form of prayer. Offering prayers and thoughts ought not to be the end of the process, but the spark leading to action. Number two, let's make sure that we remember and use the lessons of history. The people in Japan have been at the forefront of a fight to change education from a memorization of what happened to an opportunity to use what we've learned to face the challenges of today. The textbook has always been a compendium of facts, but now we're trying to make it walk away from this idea that it speaks with an omniscient voice and it just tells you what happened, to textbooks that have documents from both sides, so that we acknowledge that there are multiple perspectives and we use that conversation to affect the decisions that we're making now. For example, I believe that American students should study the forced incarceration of 130,000 American citizens during World War II to gain understanding of the dangers faced by more recent immigrants to the U.S. I think that, number three, we need to keep fighting to forgive. I know in my life that doesn't always come easy. I'm wrong and I want to fight back. But in our own lives, we must practice forgiveness in our interactions with others. When President Obama went to Hiroshima, he met the hibakusha, the people that survived the bombs, and he says, we see these forgiveness stories in these people. There's a woman who forgave a pilot who flew the plane that dropped the atomic bomb because she recognized what she really hated was war. There's a man who has gone and sought out the families of Americans killed in battle against Japan because he believed their loss was equal to his own, and he wanted to make sure that they knew that forgiveness was a way to move forward. Forgiveness is not an easy choice for most of us. We need to battle for it. But the daily practice of forgiveness is crucial to developing a forward-looking perspective. Finally, the battle for peace involves talking civilly to people that don't agree with you. The corollary to learning forgiveness is to focus on learning civility in discourse. Again, the Japanese have spoken out against the divisive language that's taking hold in many countries around the world. If we can only denigrate and demonize those that we disagree with, we build walls that hinder any attempts at peaceful resolution. Disagreements between individuals are a normal part of human existence, and we must learn to resolve conflicts peacefully with those we live with and love if we are to have any hope of interacting peacefully with those that we sincerely disagree with. So we have to find a way to talk civilly, not only to people that we care about, but to people that we disagree with. It's sometimes easy to get mad in an argument and wish for vengeance. We must fight with ourselves to take the more difficult road that leads to resolution with benefits for both sides. So how do we fight for peace? Express your outrage. Engage with history. Fight to forgive. Wage war on incivility. And remember, even though you may feel alone in doing this, the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Chris is always very touching, and his message is so important. Thank you so much. We're delighted to have Joyce Vanderveer speak to us tonight. She remembers the day the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and speaks from direct memory of that day.
In World War II, our whole society was geared toward winning the war. Not like today, when ongoing wars are background noises hardly noticed. Then, every able young man drafted. Everyone with yard space, a victory garden. Every neighborhood with an air raid warden. On August 6th of 1945, I was a college student, home for the summer, having achieved the pinnacle of confidence in my own wisdom, known as becoming a sophomore. My father drove me to my summer job on his way to work, sharing rides on rationed gas. In February, Americans and British had demolished the city of Dresden with 800 planes flying sorties for 2 nights, dropping thousands of tons of explosives and incendiary bombs. We saw it all on the newsreels. And in May, the Germans surrendered. It was just a precursor of our willingness to sacrifice civilians. On August 6th, as my father and I drove to work, listening to the radio news, we were hoping that the war in the Pacific was winding down. Our troops were preparing to invade Japan. The newscaster came on with great excitement. A single bomb from a lone plane had been dropped on Hiroshima, destroying the entire city. I knew that was impossible. That was pure hype. I said so with all the self-assurance of a college sophomore. But to my surprise, my father disagreed. My father, a physicist, had been invited to be part of the super-secret Manhattan Project that developed the atom bomb. While he declined that honor, He knew what his former UC Berkeley classmates were working on. In that moment, he realized that his friends had succeeded in unleashing the atom, and he looked very somber indeed. He understood the implications. For most Americans, the initial response was like mine: amazed surprise, even disbelief that one bomb could destroy a city, and then joy that the war was over. We, the American public, were not told that the Japanese were trying to surrender before the bombs were dropped. We believed the bombs had ended the war and there was dancing in the streets. Then pictures appeared and descriptions of the horror of nuclear death. People still alive, flesh falling off their bones, shadows on sidewalks where people had vaporized. The jubilant mood shifted, and we realized that any country might now make and deliver an atomic bomb. The splitting of the atom could not be kept a secret. I had nightmares of a blinding flash of light and a mushroom cloud and all hell descending on Earth. Many people shared that experience. While the nightmares have faded over the years, the danger has not. With Trump's finger on the nuclear button and the Iran deal in shreds, the threat of nuclear war is greater than ever. The July 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, a very hopeful development, will only come into effect when 50 nations have ratified it. So far, 70 nations have signed, but only 24 have ratified. It provides a time frame for the gradual reduction of nuclear bombs by the nations that already have them. None of the 9 nuclear nations have signed on to the pact. This week, the U.S. officially and dangerously withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Treaty Agreement signed by Reagan and Gorbachev in the 1980s. It prohibits new medium-range missiles in Europe and Russia targeting each other. The UN has decried the U.S. withdrawal. It's time to end nuclear danger, end the whole nuclear era everywhere. No nuclear weapons, no nuclear power, no uranium mining. All leave a residue of radioactive waste that will contaminate the planet for thousands of years. Perhaps we need another Manhattan Project that seeks to deal with radioactive waste. Spend the trillions that are proposed for a new generation of nuclear weapons on cleaning up the mess we already have. The only power that can stop the U.S. from flirting with global nuclear holocaust is people power. It's you and me and millions of others saying no to threatening the world with destruction, and yes to being good neighbors and good citizens of planet Earth. Yes to green sources of energy. Encourage passage of H.R. 2419 and other bills that support the Nuclear Ban Treaty. Our Declaration of Independence says that everyone, not just Americans, everyone is endowed with unalienable rights, including the right to life itself. Let's honor that by pushing for treaties and diplomatic negotiations to keep us and the world safe. This is how I would commemorate those who died in the nuclear holocausts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you. Joyce Vanderveer.
She publishes weekly the Peace newsletter, which reaches over 1,200 people. You can sign up for it at our tables. Thank you, Joyce. That was inspiring. Next, we have Jennifer Felguth to read her poem titled Peace Lanterns.
Thank you, Beverly. My poem begins with a quote from Herbert Hoover. He said, "The use of the atomic bomb with its indiscriminate killing of women and children revolts my soul." Peace lanterns. Let us gather, light candles, observe a moment of silence. Remember the victims, repudiate atrocities executed under our name. Let us stand on Pacific shore, envision hands joined in creation rather than unconscionable acts of hatred tearing apart. Let us illuminate hearts in quiet affirmation of nonviolence, ignite peace lanterns, fold paper cranes, treat our neighbors as we wish to be considered, vow to make war obsolete. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Carol Erickson of the Society of Friends will read a message from the Japanese Buddhist priest. Is that wrong? I think it is. Carol Erickson will close the program. After Carol finishes, Tai Chi master Jim Scott Behrens will play the shakuhachi flute for the lantern floating. But first we'll be lighting the lanterns. So thank you, Carol. Thank you, Jim.
This is a declaration of peace from worldbeyondwar.org. I understand that wars and militarism make us less safe rather than protect us. That they kill, injure, and traumatize adults, children, and infants, severely damage the natural environment, erode civil liberties, and drain our economies, siphoning resources from life-affirming activities. Therefore, we commit to engage in and support nonviolent efforts to end all war and preparations for war, and to create a sustainable and just peace.
Thank you, Carol. We're now going to finish getting all the lanterns onto the rafts, and as it gets dark, we'll be lighting those lanterns and setting out onto the cove.
Having pub.